So, hi. Oh, I forgot the book. Hang on. Hi. Okay. So, my name is Pippa. I wanted to film a video about going to university with a chronic illness, and I'm going to try and keep this quite snappy. We're just going to get through it. So, to give you a bit of background about me, I went to the University of York in 2013. I studied psychology and education, and I graduated with a 2-1 in 2016. Now, during the first year of my studies, I was actually diagnosed with my chronic illness. I'd actually been ill prior to this, but it was only that weird space in between your first and your second year that my health really did decline. It was only then when I actually got the diagnosis and I started identifying as chronically ill. My experiences showed me that there isn't a great deal of support out there for chronically ill students. There were so many challenges that I couldn't possibly have anticipated prior to it happening to me, and I was basically left with all of this kind of niche knowledge and insight, and I wanted to do something with it so that anybody in a similar position could benefit from it and hopefully not feel as kind of alone as I did. So that led me to write my book, my debut non-fiction book, which is called University and Chronic Illness, A Survival Guide. It's published by Dazer & Co, and it came out at the end of January 2020. I asked for your questions on Instagram. You can find me at lifeofpippa, and there were some really good ones, and I've tried to kind of vaguely structure them, so let's just have a go and see how we get on. All the disability support pages eventually look the same. How do I know where is best? Now, I'm assuming this is about choosing a university when you have a chronic illness or a disability, and that's a very valid point, and this is something I've realised for myself recently. The disability support pages on the websites of individual universities leave a lot to be desired, in my opinion. They all kind of seem to regurgitate the same standard advice, doesn't really give you any insight into what life is like as a disabled student at that particular uni. My advice would be, wherever possible, to try and find somebody at that university who you can talk to. It might be that that's through an open day where you can actually go up to current students and discuss their experiences. And with social media nowadays, it might even be that you can find somebody online, send them a polite little message, and if they've been in that position themselves, hopefully they'll realise that there's power in opening up and they'll be glad to help you. How do you inform your university about your illness? If you choose to disclose your condition, which you are not obliged to do, but I would personally recommend doing because it's kind of the avenue to accessing the support you're entitled to, I would say the best thing to do is to go to your disability services like we've just mentioned. You can usually book an appointment online or through calling them, and if you book an initial appointment, you'll be able to speak to somebody about your situation, about your needs, and what tends to happen is you'll have a support plan put in place which kind of discusses the adjustments you might need, and with your permission that will also be passed on to your lecturers so that they too are aware of your situation. So in terms of actually making it kind of like official, I'd say disability services is the way to go. Do we know what unis legally have to do for us? It's tricky to know if what we're asking for adjustment wise can be viewed as optional. From the top of my head, I believe that every university has some sort of diversity and equality statement. You should be able to find it on your website or access it somewhere, and that should basically line out in black and white what the university is committed to and the standards they hold themselves to. And then the other resource that comes to mind is actually an organisation called Disability Rights UK. They're quite good in terms of having fact sheets which outline kind of legal guidance in specific areas and how that applies to the lives of disabled people. And I do know that they used to have a university one, so I might actually go and have a look, and if I can find it, I'll link that below as well. And then there kind of were a couple of questions around the topic of missing contact hours and keeping up to date with work. And I know that this is a really big worry for people with chronic illnesses, because when you have a fluctuating illness, it's not always possible to leave the house and attend your contact hours, and sometimes even the exertion of actually getting up and getting dressed and actually getting to the contact hours means that by the time you've got there, your brain and your body is, to be honest, a little bit useless if you're anything like me. It's tricky because I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area, and actually at the time of filming this is rife. And I've actually found it very eye-opening that some of the provisions that disabled students have had to fight really hard for in terms of working remotely are now being applied at the drop of a hat on a grand scale, but that's a whole other issue. We won't get into that now. In terms of attending lectures and contact hours, I would say if it's something you're concerned about or something you feel you might struggle with, it's worth going back to your disability advisor, discussing that with them and making sure that that's implemented in your support plan. so that lecturers and people leading the sessions kind of know that if you're not there, it may well be because of health reasons that are valid, rather than the fact you just can't be bothered to turn up. The thing I think that many universities don't understand is that sometimes lenience with attendance can be ultimately beneficial, and it can actually mean that you're thriving more in your course of study. So for me, in my second and third year, I really struggled with leaving the house, not just for uni, but in general. And I actually found that by having that lenience with attendance and knowing that they knew I was working from home was, one, a weight off my mind, and two, I found that I could actually get much more productive studying that counted for something done if I was doing it in bed in my pyjamas and I hadn't wasted all the energy having to get up, get dressed, get to uni, deal with all the sensory overload of being around other people and in that kind of environment. So I actually found that it was more productive for me to work in that way. And obviously there is the disadvantage that you're not actually experiencing things for yourself, but with technology, it should be that you can access your lectures and preferably lecture recordings online. When you have a chronic illness, I do think that there needs to be flexibility in place, because if your mark is determined by your attendance and your attendance is determined by your health, which is obviously out of your control, I do feel that that's kind of unfair, kind of just not right. No, I feel like I have too much hair today. Missing contact hours but keeping up, I think we've kind of touched on this already. I think it's just a case of being vigilant. Even if you're not physically attending lectures, it helps to be organised, to obviously pace yourself and think in advance about what you can realistically achieve on a set day. There's no point blasting through, I mean, I'm such a hypocrite because this is exactly what I did. There's no point in blasting through loads and loads of work on any given day when it means that you're going to be completely wiped out for the couple of days that come after it. Because, and I know this is so much easier said than done, but it's so much more productive to do it little and often. So if you do a bit each day, rest, take care of yourself, and just try and chip through a bit at a time. It can be frustrating at the time, I know it can, but I do believe that in the grand scheme of things it will pay off. Intermissions, should I go back, expressing your needs and managing fatigue. So I'm guessing that intermissions in this context is kind of the same as a leave of absence. Leave of absence is kind of where you decide to withdraw from your studies for a set period of time, you request permission to leave, you take some time away, and then you go back and you pick up where you left off. And if you're going through any kind of rough patch with your health, I do think having that option there is a really valuable thing. That's actually something I experienced in my postgraduate degree, which I'm going to touch on later because that's a whole other story. I do think if you're kind of struggling but you don't want to make the concrete decision to withdraw completely, leave of absence can be very valuable. And in terms of thinking whether it's right for you to go back, I would say trust your gut. Just listen to your body and what it's telling you. Like if you're having like real kind of anxiety about going back and you're worried about the impact it's going to have on your health, like on the one hand I'm sure that's normal because transitioning back is a difficult thing in itself, but if you've coped much better on your time off than you have in uni, both physically and mentally, then yeah, maybe it's worth reconsidering what you want to do. We could talk about my masters now actually. Yeah, maybe we could do that now. So I don't think I've actually talked about my personal experiences of postgraduate study online before, and I did think about doing a blog post, but yeah, it was an eventful time. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated in 2016, and at the time my health meant that employment wasn't really kind of what I thought was a feasible option for me, so I made the decision to study a master's degree. I applied for my kind of first choice course in my final year of study, and I was accepted onto that course, and I decided that I would study for 2 years part-time rather than 1 year. When I hadn't heard anything from the university until a week before, I emailed them like, hey, why haven't I heard anything? I've got my accommodation sorted, everything's ready to go, I'm ready to enrol. And they emailed back with a simple one-line email saying, oh, sorry, we decided not to run that course this year. So obviously that was very much not ideal. I just thought that was unacceptable for a university to let you go through all of that, secure your accommodation for the next year, which you can't get out of. I had a flat with my friend that I was committed to and I'd signed the lease for. And yeah, they were just like, oh, nah, not running it this year. So I was like, great, that's brilliant. Thanks for that. What happened next is that I needed to find something I could do while still living in and making the most of the accommodation that I'd signed for, and with my situation, commuting was going to be a challenge even for nearby universities. So what I decided to do instead was an online postgraduate degree, but it was aligned with a specific university, so it wasn't like an open university programme, but it was a specific UK university's online learning programme. And yeah, I thought, oh yeah, this is great because I can work remotely, I can do it all. There was no need to attend any contact hours, all the information was online, I'd made them aware of my needs, and I felt really positive about it. And that master's was in health psychology, and it was a 2-year course full-time. I struggled, one, with the workload. I don't want to kind of minimise that because I did struggle with the workload, and actually during this time I had 4 months of chronic migraines, which again was a really fun time. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I was basically trying to access some support services and talk about the fact that I was really struggling with my health and I felt like I needed a little bit of support. And the thing that I found with online university compared with real life university or traditional university is that even though it kind of looks more accessible on the surface, I found that the level of support just wasn't there. So my personal supervisor didn't even know my name, never bothered to learn, never bothered to inquire. If I ever sent any kind of, and I'm not a needy person at all, but I did kind of reach out a few times and say, look, I could use a bit of support here. They'd kind of send one line replies, just weren't interested whatsoever. And that, combined with the fact that this online programme in particular was very problematic in itself, in that things weren't uploaded on time, they were full of errors, we had assessment shenanigans, it was just not a good time. I stuck it out for a year of the 2 years, and at the end of the first year I thought, I'm going to take a leave of absence because I'm not okay, I'm not enjoying it, and to be honest I am paying so much money for this and it's just not worth it. But maybe I'll change my mind, maybe things will improve, so I'll take a year leave of absence. So I put the request in. Again, they didn't care regardless, they were like, okay, cool, see ya. So off I went, and it actually transpired that, if you know my story, I secured an internship with a disability charity and I entered the world of employment. I found something that worked for me. When it came round to a year later, I knew that I was much happier in what I was doing than I would have been if I'd gone back. So I formally withdrew, and that was the end of my master's. I did still get a postgraduate diploma in health psychology, which I'm really proud of actually, because it was a tough old year, let me tell you. Right, let's do some more questions. Okay, next let's go on to some questions about socialising. Again, very advice for disclosing your illness to flatmates. I would say it very much depends on your personal circumstances and what you're comfortable doing. Again, it's entirely at your discretion whether you want to disclose it, but personally I think there's value in disclosing it. If you're comfortable, kind of initiating it in a really chilled out setting, kind of saying, hey, by the way, like this is kind of my situation, explaining however much you want to. Maybe there's kind of analogies you can use, like I know there's the spoon theory for the chronic illness community. There's resources out there like Stickman Comms run by Hannah Ensor, who kind of explain complex conditions in little stickman things. Stuff like that can be really useful if you're kind of looking for some backup in what you're trying to say. Alternatively, it might be that you feel more comfortable kind of mentioning it in a group chat, any kind of group chat that you have. Sometimes that can actually make people feel more open to asking questions, so that can be really valuable. I've actually got I've actually got a little section on kind of that side of things, incorporating opinions of a few different former chronically ill students on kind of disclosing their condition and communicating with flatmates. Yeah, a bit of that's in here. There's a whole big section about socialising, all kinds of shenanigans. So you should definitely buy it. That don't get it. In my 3rd year, and still someone said to me it could be worse. Yeah, that's rubbish, I'm sorry. It's not a nice feeling, and I don't think you're going to like my answer very much here, but I do think, as purely as somebody who's an outsider and not emotionally connected with this situation, I do think maybe that's them trying to make you feel better, trying to do something that gives you comfort, and obviously they've missed the mark. But sometimes non-disabled people just don't know how to communicate these things, they don't know how to react. And that's the way we've kind of been brought up around disability in society today. Sometimes people don't know what to say, or they feel a bit uncomfortable. Sometimes they want to help and they don't know how. So while I totally get that that's a frustrating situation, and I'm sure if it was me I would have been upset as well, yeah, sometimes I do think you have to take it with a pinch of salt, and sometimes these things aren't worth the energy on trying to tackle. Although that said, it might be that there's another situation further down the line where you can kind of say like, that sort of statement wasn't helpful to me. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of direct your statements more this way instead, or like this kind of thing would make me feel better. Just generally quite worried about coursemates' reaction to my ambulatory wheelchair usage. Yeah, valid, really valid concern. I'm sure that's something that a lot of people can relate to. Again, if you feel comfortable, it might be worth initiating that discussion ahead of time, just kind of saying like, hey, just so you know, I use a wheelchair in these situations, but I don't use it all the time. I struggle with walking or standing, and it just helps me to kind of manage my condition and make sure I can do as much as possible. And if anyone has a problem with it, then frankly they're not worth your time. And the beautiful thing about university is that if this one person upsets you, then there are thousands of other potential friends to make. Wow, I sound like a CBeebies presenter. If you lived in halls, how did you manage your relationships while looking after your health? Okay, so halls of residence, student accommodation has pros and cons, I think, when it comes to chronic illness. The pros is that it's easy to socialise, and you can do so without having to leave the house or even get dressed if you don't want to. Like, there are just people there, and any time in the day practically, if you're feeling a bit lonely and you want to chat with someone, the chances are you will find someone milling around. But then, of course, there are the noise threats, the fact that kitchens can be a bit problematic, there's all kinds of other stuff, and again that's discussed in the book and potential ways of combating some of these issues. But in terms of relationships specifically, I think when you are kind of dealing with a chronic illness, sometimes it's a case of being strict with yourself but also cutting yourself some slack. I think you have to get the balance right between immersing yourself in kind of this social experience and becoming part of a group and forming new friendships, and then also knowing that it's okay to step away and have some time alone to rest and recuperate for a while. I mean, my best advice is that if at any given time you're feeling like you just need to take yourself away for a little while, it might be worth saying like, oh, I'm just going to pop off now, but are you going to this thing later? Can I see you later? Like, do you want to maybe do this later? So they kind of, other people, not that they would, but other people know not to take it personally. It's just something that you need to do. And the more that people get to know you, the more that they will be able to understand and anticipate that. So with my own experience, by the end of uni, my housemates knew that if we were doing something on one given day, that we would need to block out the next few days for me to rest and recover, which was just the cutest thing ever, and it was so helpful. Okay, so let's just do a quick fire miscellaneous. Let's just do a few quick fire miscellaneous ones. There was one about spoony essentials, and I like that question. So what are the kinds of things that you might forget if you're chronically ill but are worth taking? And I think the two that came to mind straight away were eye mask and earplugs. Even if you don't think you're going to need them, the blinds in student accommodation can be thin, the walls can be thin, and it is well worth taking them. And it took me a few years to figure out, and I wish I'd found them sooner, but if you can budget for them, because I know the price range can vary, noise cancelling headphones are a game changer. Honestly, they have changed my life for the better. Like, even now I'm not a student, and honestly, the amount I rely on them is quite concerning, but also really good because they've helped me a lot. Another tip, if you're moving into university as a fresher, it can be worth signing up for next day delivery services. So something like Amazon Prime, they do student rates or they do a free trial, and the time when you move into uni can be a really valuable time to utilise that, because it means that if you have forgotten something, and you inevitably will, you can just place an order online and know that it's coming the next day. You don't have to worry about getting out to the shops to buy whatever random thing it is you need. It's just coming, and might be worth considering. Somebody just simply asked, why do you use a wheelchair? And I mean, probably not uni specific, but just in case you were wondering, like the question earlier, I too use a wheelchair part-time. With my condition, I struggle with standing and walking for long periods of time, and that can leave me very ill the next day. So I use either a manual wheelchair pushed by someone else, mine is called George, after George Ezra, or a couple of years ago I actually got an electric wheelchair, or a power chair, who is named Janice and has also changed my life for the better. What was your biggest challenge? Okay, there's a few I could pick, but for me, my biggest challenge of being a chronically ill student was FOMO, fear of missing out. The fact that I had a really solid group of friends was obviously amazing, but the fact that my condition actively prevented me from sometimes going out and socialising and doing the fun things they were doing was really, really difficult. And I can distinctly remember times where I would be stuck in bed feeling really just bad, you know what it's like, just feeling awful, and I would look on my phone and I would see all my friends out doing really fun things, and I would just think, how is this okay that I'm here and they're there? And I would just feel really sad. I would feel like I was getting left behind, and it was, again, not great. not gonna lie. Yeah, so FOMO was probably my biggest challenge. I mean, obviously there are a million other challenges related to studying and kind of independent living when you have a chronic illness, but FOMO is the one that I personally really struggled with and struggled to keep a positive mindset about. There's no kind of like quick fix for FOMO, but I did share a few of my own tips in my book if you're interested, again in the socialising section. Yeah, it's not easy, so I hope you know that you're not alone if that's something you're experiencing at the minute. I'm sure it's a really, really common thing. And one just came in that I just thought might be quite a nice one to end on, and it was, what helped you most to complete the course? Stereotypical answer, but communicate. Really think about your needs and think about the things that could help you, even if they might seem kind of unfeasible or unrealistic. Just really think about the kind of practical things that could help you with your studies and independent living, and just talk, because you never know, it might be that there's something out there that can help you or partially take that situation away. And please don't ever feel like you're being a pain by asking for these adjustments, because at the end of the day, having these things in place just makes sure that you're on an equal playing field with the rest of your peers, and it means that you're not necessarily as disadvantaged because of your chronic illness. So yeah, please don't be afraid to kind of like really push for what you need, and if you feel that your needs aren't being heard, take it further. That's something that I personally regret not doing with a couple of the issues I faced. It's worth pursuing, it's always worth pursuing, please don't give up, but at the same time kind of think about what is worth your time and energy fighting for and what to simply let go instead. Kind of like, you learn as you go along, I think, and I do think it gets easier as you go along. That's really important to say as well. Just trust yourself and push for what you're entitled to. Cool, well I hope that was marginally helpful. I like the idea of doing these. I mean YouTube is definitely not my kind of comfort zone, but I like doing stuff like this on Instagram, so I hope you found stuff helpful there, and maybe we'll try and do this again in the future. And I just thought I'd give one last plug, because I have loads of comprehensive advice that wasn't covered in any of these Q&As in my book. So if you know a disabled student, or you're preparing to become a chronically ill student yourself, I would recommend, obviously I would recommend it because I'm hugely biased, but just to give you a kind of overview, it covers choosing a degree, choosing a uni, the application process, accommodation, freshers week, day-to-day living, social life, finances, studying, and plenty more. It's got my experiences in there, like loads of my own embarrassing stories, and it's also got contributions from lots of other chronically ill students who kind of studied in various different areas or who had experiences that differed to mine, and I hope it's helpful. Yeah, I'll leave it linked below, and apart from that I think we'll leave this here. So thank you so much for watching. I hope today's as kind as possible. Thank you so much for watching. I hope today's as kind as possible to you, and I will see you next time.